I'll start with you, John. The president asked the same question when he was speaking earlier in Safina Uma's story, the soundbite she carried, and he was saying, why would Ford Foundation, even he was asking, sponsor instability in Kenya, want to sponsor something like that, which they have denied for the record. But what do you make of the recent events? First of all, Sema Ukweli officers today, there were protests. They called themselves what? Government? Vijana wa Serikali. And then the recent letter written by the Foreign Affairs PS Korir Singwe, who will host tomorrow, asking where did this money go?
You know, this is not the first time we've seen this kind of attack, especially when government is stuck. You know, they are unable to explain or to be honest with Kenyans about exactly what's happening. Civil society, you know, I think what's happening in Kenya with the Gen Zs has caught us all as a nation surprised, you know, and also impressed by the sheer scale and idealism that we're seeing from Kenya's young people. Civil society doesn't have the capacity to mobilize Kenyans in the way that is being described. We've had attacks against civil society in the 1990s, same kind of language, same kind of allegations. Again, when Jubilee was there, you know, offices being raided, AfriCog was attempted to raid AfriCog, the same allegations. When you have a situation in the country where political failure on the part of the leaders themselves has created a situation in the country that they're looking for somebody to blame. And in this case, media and civil society are in the firing line. Mm-hmm. I think I wouldn't want to dignify some of the allegations being made very much. When our accounts and others have been, you know, and they have access to all of them, when those have been examined, there's never been a problem. It's an accusation that is brought up by government when it's on the back foot and is struggling to look for basically, you know, red herrings that they can blame.
All right. Your thoughts, Waringa. Did anybody pay you? Did you protest? I should start there.
Yes, I did protest.
And were you paid to do so?
I think like Githongo is saying that no one has the capacity to finance these protests. People are being financed by their own lived realities. You know, people from all informal settlements, for example, they're being financed by the poverty that they're facing. They're being financed by the hopelessness this country has. You know, people in this country are hopeless. But because of that hopelessness, because of that anger, because of that poverty, because of that level of, you're without humanity, you're without dignity. It is that is fueling people. It is not money. And if anything, I think this government has to be very clear on several issues, because you cannot start talking about Ford Foundation and civil societies or you do not address the fact that you have been selling this country to foreign interest. Why are you not accountable for that money? Why are you not telling us you've already sold our, you know, our souls and our energies to IMF and World Bank? Why aren't you addressing that? Why aren't you accountable to that money to Kenyans? Why do you want to focus on financing of people? People are financed by their own realities. Mm-hmm. So the government cannot start running around. I think it is in the character of you know, governments that when they don't have any idea on how to resolve a crisis, you know, like this crisis. You know, our Generation Z is raising concrete issues, and because the government has no capacity, it has no legitimacy to resolve the questions that are being raised, you know, by our generation, and of course every other Kenyan that is, you know, coming out to the streets every day. The nature of all of governments, even if you look at all the way through even colonial times, during Kenyatta, they criminalized. You know, they turn to the only law that they can control, criminal law. So they want to criminalize the civil society, they want to criminalize the media, but instead of addressing the issues that are being raised, so they want to run. I think Ruto has no idea how he's going to resolve this crisis. He has never had an idea how he will resolve this crisis. In fact, the rising of this protest and where they started, you know, if you look at, you know, the process after the flood disaster, you know, people coming up to protest against the right to housing, you know, that is the birth event of the Occupy movement. You know, when people are coming out to protest to house, you know, that period, Kenyans, I remember because through Mathare Social Justice Center, we had a fundraiser, and Kenyans themselves were contributing because the government had no idea how they will resolve the flood crisis. So again, they criminalized. They started saying people who are living next to the river. So they criminalize instead of resolving.
All right. Yeah. Irungu Hort, on the same question to you, what motive would Ford Foundation have to fund CSOs to what word was used? I'm struggling.
Fund, to ferry,
yes,
to
anarchy.
organize anarchy. No, I think we'll probably find that Ford Foundation is innocent. And I think, knowing Ford Foundation for the last 30 years in terms of their work, they have done a lot to essentially fund social justice work, development and good governance. And that history is known. It is curious, I think, for those people who are trying to look for the financier in Ford Foundation, it is curious that actually all the information that's required to incriminate them is on their website.
Probably.
And the statement in response to the PS simply was to say, politely, just look at our website and you can see what the grants were going towards. I think the other thing we have to note is that the narrative has shifted over the last few weeks, right? So let me just go through it. First, it was the Russians, then it was the Chinese, then it was the anarchists, then it was the LGBTIQ community, and then it became the politicians, and then lo and behold, it became international NGOs and national NGOs. And I think what we have to say is that, I think as Waringa is saying, is that the systemic issues that actually gave rise to the Gen Z leadership that we've seen is really rooted in a profound lack of faith and confidence in the type of governance that we've seen. It is a concern around corruption. It's a concern around why do 47 creditors have a right of passage when 55 million Kenyans still are struggling with health, education and agricultural issues. So I think that's the starting point for a honest conversation. I think lastly, I would just say, that for the organizations that have been linked to the Ford Foundation funding, having negotiated Ford Foundation funding in the past, and I'm sure I think John has done this as well, is it takes months, 6 to 8 months to get to a point where you're being contracted by Ford Foundation, and that's not even the money. That is just simply that you're getting to an agreement with them on what to do. To have funded the protests, the funding, the planning would have had to have happened early last year. Right? And I think that's just ludicrous. I mean, what we've seen from this movement is it moved very quickly and it is continually evolving. So it is just not possible for Ford Foundation to be behind the protest. It's just not possible.
All right, I will come back to this conversation. I want to move on with a couple more stories I'm sure you'll also want to weigh in on. But there's just to advise where we are heading, there's 194 million shillings, which the PS said that there's unexplained expedited funding amounting to approximately 194 Kenya shillings over the last month alone. So that, I suppose, is what he views as suspect, although he will come to speak for himself tomorrow. He was not available today.